So that might sound quite drastic. When you look at this, this is from the National Food Strategy. This is a report that the government commissioned, and they also recommended. This was produced by Henry de Bobby. They also recommended a bit more of a drastic reduction in wild livestock production, as did the Dasgupta review, which was a review commissioned by the government by Partha Dasgupta, who's an ecological economist at Cambridge. They're all saying, and NGOs, a lot of NGOs are saying the same thing, that we need to reduce livestock production. And we can do this because we have so much livestock. So you can see here the amount of land it's taking up. Roughly, you can see the beef and lamb pasture, that's the majority of it. And this has been extremely intensified in the last few years. The amount of agricultural land hasn't changed a lot, even over the last 20, 30 years, but the intensification of the way that we used it has. So we've got pasture that we're using. We've also got areas, you can see a little further down, for dairy feed and beef feed. Dairy pasture doesn't take as much land up, but then we've got a lot of intensive dairy and sheds, which isn't great. We've got some cereals down there. That isn't necessarily feeding people directly, and most of that goes to ultra-processed foods. So none of this land so far is feeding us in the UK. There's a bit at the top now, up in the Hebrides, where you've got fruit and vegetables, and you've got golf courses. So you can see the amount of land that we use to produce fruit and veg, and the amount for golf courses is roughly the same. Orchards is tiny. So that fruit and veg and some of those cereals feed ours directly. The rest of that, the majority of that land, and you can see we've got poultry and pigs as well, majority of that land's feeding animals, not people. And then you can see the overseas land footprint is roughly the same. And that's for only just these groups of animals. Our overseas footprint is much, much bigger than that, because we've got other commodities like timber and all the rest of the things that we import. So we must reduce this. It's the only way that we can do it to meet our climate nature commitments. So we need food system transformation. 70% of the UK land is agricultural. I've just mentioned that before. 18 million hectares raising livestock, and the numbers from last year are roughly cattle 9.6 million, pigs 5.3 million, sheep 33 million. We're the fourth biggest nation for sheep export in the world. Poultry, 190 million head of poultry, with 20 million head of poultry in the Wye Valley, where we've got an ecological catastrophe going on. And so roughly, from DEFRA statistics last year, we've got 230 million farmed animals on an island of around 24 million hectares, with, I don't know, what's the population now, 66 million people. So it's vast. And one of our scientists, Paul Behrens, has said that if we adopt a more plant-based diet, we could double the climate dividend. And what it means by that is that we can lower emissions, because this production of livestock is extremely high in CO2 from the feed that's being produced. That feed production is high in CO2 because it's monocrops, so it's vast areas of maize and wheat, and also driving deforestation for all the oilseed, soya, and the palm oil that feed livestock. So that's extremely high in CO2. It's high in methane, which is very dangerous. It's getting more dangerous, the amount of methane that we've got going on, and nitrous oxide. So we could cut emissions, and then we could release all that land, 4 million hectares or even more, to capture carbon. So that's the way that he's talking about it, in terms of doubling the carbon dividend. So that's just a bit of an explanation about what's going on. So the way that the government thinks that they're going to deliver these targets is through farming more than anything. So via the environmental land management schemes, or ELMS for short. And farmers are expected to deliver them, but these schemes are voluntary and they're not well formed at the moment. They have started rolling out. Since we left the EU, this will be the way that farms will be paid through the ELM schemes, which is really scary for them because they're going to lose their basic payment that every farmer in the country got. That was based on the amount of land that they had, and now they've got to sign up to one of these schemes to get any money at all, to get any subsidies. So there's a huge worry, particularly for hill farmers who are farming sheep in the uplands, as to what on earth they're going to do. It's so difficult for them to change, and it's all on them. They're locked into an unsustainable food market where we're producing, that's driven by the food industry and supermarkets to produce meat and ultra processed foods, and that's shaped our diets now. And Food Unwrapped on Channel 4 told us that recently that we are now eating 80 million ready meals each week in this country. We're the biggest consumers of processed food in Europe. About 62% of our shopping basket is now ultra processed foods. So obviously this is causing other problems as well: cost of living crisis, health. It's high in emissions, 35% of emissions. It's extremely high, including our imports. It's heavy on water and it's heavy on agrochemicals, which is, that's getting as bad as climate change, the pollution. And so there's no room for our climate solutions, there's no room for nature, and there's no room for people. So just checking out the biodiversity on target on woodland. The government's set, and now bearing in mind what I've just said to you about farming, the government's set to increase the tree canopy and woodland cover by not very much really, it's only 2%, 14.5% to 16.5% in England. These figures are a bit inflated from what you might have seen before, because actually woodland cover in England is only 10%, but they include all individual trees and trees in parkland and things in that 14.5%. But we need to ramp up woodland. And planting new forests, planting new trees isn't the fastest way to do it. The fastest way to do it is regenerate existing woodland and rewild areas, and that's become a very, very scary word for farmers. But if we were to get livestock off the land, there's a huge opportunity to do that. So woodland's it's our biggest absorber of CO2 in terms of area. But there's no protection at the moment for veteran ancient trees, and they store the most carbon and they support the most biodiversity. So the majority of this new woodland would be delivered by farmers in the ELM schemes, and they're all saying how we're going to do it. And the plans, as I just mentioned, they lack plans for regeneration of existing woodland. And Friends of the Earth say that we can double our woodland in the time they're going to take to plant new forests, just by leaving the land alone and let it regenerate, and then carefully plant existing species in the area to boost that regeneration.